The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. And there's a lot of passion on this, especially on my side of the aisle. I was at home this weekend, and it's all anybody was talking about. The American people don't believe for a second that this stuff was lost accidentally. Mike Richline, a friend of mine, used to work at my computer consulting company, still in the business, email me, Blake, there's no way this could have happened. You got to do something about it. And that's the frustration that I'm getting from the American people. And if we came back to you and said, oh, I don't have the resources to save all the records to comply with the IRS tax law, y'all wouldn't let me skate. So I don't think you guys ought to be able to skate on the resource issues. And I'll get back to that in a second. In the Clinton administration, you worked in the OMB, didn't you? And part of your job was to oversee the executive branch record keeping and these Federal Records Act type requirements. Did you not do that?
That was actually done by the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs.
But were you involved in that when you were with the Clinton administration?
I was not involved personally, but I was the Deputy Director for Management.
Okay, so are you familiar with the Federal Records Act?
I am familiar with the Federal Records Act.
It says the head of each federal agency shall make and preserve records containing adequate, proper documentation of the organization, functions, policies, decisions, procedures, and essential transactions of the agencies, and it goes on along those lines. Your IRS manual says the way y'all do that is to print out the emails,
the official
right?
Records.
Anything that's official record. Who decides what's an official record?
The employees are provided background information, and then they make a judgment as to whether it's an official record or not.
All right, and so if you're doing something that you might believe is questionable, you might lean towards not deciding that.
It's possible, but we've trained over 2,000 information resource coordinators across the agency to continue to oversee and encourage and make sure that we comply.
In response to some earlier questions, you indicated that in going through Lois Lerner's emails that you use search terms. Is that correct?
Search terms were used for all of the searches.
All right, so how do you use search terms on the hard copy emails that she would have been required to print out from that lost hard drive? Has somebody gone through all of her files or the files of people she routinely corresponded with to search those hard copy records?
Yes.
All right. Don't you think it would have been easier and saved some money if you'd have had that in electronic form?
No doubt.
All right, we heard from the other side that there's an issue with respect to the resources there. Now, all right, I did this on my cell phone, and let me find my notes here, because you guys got a lot of people good at math at the IRS, so I'm going to assume you guys could figure this out, all right? So let's say your procedure is to print the records out. All right, so I went on to, did a Google search, say, all right, what's the average size of a Word document? And they said, well, you could get 64,782 Word documents of about 9 pages per gigabyte. A terabyte's 1,000 gigabytes, so that's 64.8 million documents. All right? Now, I went on Amazon and saw you could buy a terabyte hard drive for about $59. Buy 2 of them, so, $120. The statistics in the industry, average cost to print a page of documents, it's about 5 to 8 cents when you include paper and toner and wear and tear on the printer. So if you do that math and multiply it out, it looks to me like for every terabyte of storage you added to the email, you'd save $21 million in printing fees, not to mention the greenness of it. How come some of the mathematicians at the IRS didn't realize, hey, we go out and, all right, let's say you got to buy a computer and hook it up. All right, so let's spend $5,000 on a backup system for our email and save $21 million.
Got 90,000 employees, get one of those for each employee.
Well, each employee is not going to have millions of pages of emails and documents. You could do it on a system-wide basis.
Not in our system, you can't.
It's not stored on an Exchange server. Can't you get a Barracuda email backup that you see advertised on TV that captures all the email?
That's right. That's one of the things that when we looked at it, I'm told the estimate was $10 to $30 million to create a server that would hold all of that.
All right, $10 million, $21 million to print. You've already saved $10 million.
If we're printing $21 million worth of stuff, probably.
Well, and you'd be, no question you're complying with the Federal Records Act because you're saving everything. Wouldn't be relying on the judgment. So this lack of resources thing doesn't fly. I'm sorry. I ran out of time. I had some other questions, but I will yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chaffetz asked why the 6-month backup wasn't applied to Lois Lerner's emails, and you suspected that it was too much effort. Do you have any emails to indicate there was a discussion about going to the backups to try and get hers?
There's none that I know of.
Have you looked for any to see what the IT staff, what sort of effort? You mentioned they made an effort to retrieve the hard drive, but what about the software effort on the servers?
They actually, as far as I understand, her email was in her, from April on.
Right, but there was some on the servers.
Email account. She had that email. They then were focused primarily on the hard drive, which is where she had archived her emails.
Well, that hard drive, you're saying it's gone, and I'll accept that it's gone. But what about the software backups? You don't see any evidence of an email trail where the IT department was trying to go to the servers to get those emails?
No, they had on the server emails from April forward. In terms of whether they went and actually went to the backup tapes.
I understand that. I'm in at the time.
I haven't seen anything about the backup tapes.
Her hard drive was crashed in April 2011.
I'm sorry. In June 11, we have emails from April 2011.
All right. I'm on to another question. Was that hard drive replaced?
Yes.
Are you in possession of that hard drive?
The Inspector General has it.
So could we look at that hard drive to see if she was in the habit of deleting emails?
You're welcome to ask the Inspector General for it.
But I mean, wouldn't it be possible, because you're collecting emails from her associates, so you know which emails she sent and retrieved, did it occur to you to look on her hard drive to see if she purposely deleted any?
No, we haven't looked at that, but we do have, as I say, we've produced all of these emails. It would be possible to take a look at that.
So next question, you said there's about a 3 to 5% chance that a hard drive will fail. That's in a year. You testified to that last week and also tonight.
That's right. That's what I advise is the industry standard.
So that's about a 1 in 30 chance if it were 3%. But let's see, the Chairman Camp sent a letter to the IRS demanding the IRS explain allegations of targeting Tea Party and other groups, and her hard drive failed within 10 days. Just doing a little math here, the probability of that failing in 10 days instead of a year is actually 1 in 1,000.
Well, that's not the way probability
I understand.
works. Every day,
a lot of bad things could have happened, so maybe it was 1 in 100 or 1 in 10 that something bad happened.
The way probability works is it's the same probability every day. It's like when you flip a coin, if
yes,
it lands head 10 times in a row.
You can tell me how probability works. I took the class at MIT. It's about 1 in 1,000 that it would fail within the 10 days that she received that letter.
We must have taken a different probability class.
I think so. So can you tell me the timing of the other hard drives that failed that were her associates? Were there any that failed in that same time period or near that?
I don't know, but we're pursuing that. I don't know what the list looks like.
Because if another one failed, one of her associates within that same 10 days, that means it's a 1 in a million probability that 2 hard drives failed with somebody dealing with this case in that 10-day window. If there's a 3% annual probability.
As I've said, we're investigating that. We'll provide you a full report, including the names and hard drives, when they failed, and whether emails were lost as a result of the failure.
Correct. And notice I am not questioning your integrity.
I appreciate that.
We're talking about numbers here.
Right.
I do, though, sort of question your judgment a little bit about not sharing this bad information with us. You had some suspicion in February and then in March that maybe all of the emails might not be retrievable. There's a saying that bad news never gets better with age. It never improves with age. And what I want to ask you now is, are there any other anomalies in the data or in the retrieval of emails that you can think of now so we could avoid having a second hearing on this in 6 months?
That's a fair question and a good question. I'm not aware of any.
Okay, so there's nothing like somebody came
other than we're pursuing the other custodians.
Right, the other 8 hard drives that have failed.
Right, that's what we knew last week. We're still looking. I don't know what the final number will be.
Okay, so you understand my question.
I understand your question.
Of bad news that was similar to the bad news you had in February I'm asking you to share it now.
That's right. And I've said I do not know of any other bad news, as you put it.
Okay. One final question. If we had a flat tax or a fair tax, would we be here today?
No. I'm a big supporter of tax simplification. I support Chairman Camp's attempt to move that dialogue forward. I'm prepared to be as helpful as I can.
I do, too. Thank you very much.
The gentleman from Kentucky with several patents and a degree from MIT in engineering made some great points. We will now go to the gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I am not a student of MIT. Have 3 degrees ranging from a bachelor's degree to a theology degree to a law degree. And this has been an amazing story. Sat here in front just a few weeks ago, relative time frame, and I asked you, and just said, without any definition, can we provide all the thing you agreed to? But when you just take a step back, this has just got to be, I have a 15-year-old that I love dearly. He's different than my other 2 children because my 15-year-old has an active imagination. His active imagination can lead you on some pretty amazing trips. And let's just think about this for just a moment. You have an agency, supposedly, in Cincinnati that decides on its own, just sui sponte, just to say, we're going to start looking into certain files. By the way, then we don't tell Washington, we don't let anybody else know, although pretty well set fact that was probably not accordance to good policy. When the chairman of one of our committees makes an inquiry concerning this kind of information, a hard drive fails. 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, then Cincinnati decides to tell that we have an issue. We move forward in this progression, and we have seen the 5th taken. We've had evidence come here when you said we're going to have all the evidence, all of the facts presented. And again, it's still sort of hard to believe that even it should have at least come up, I'll produce all that I have, but oh, by the way, we got a problem. It also seems hard to believe as you go through this whole story that when the Inspector General was going through this whole thing, nobody seems to have told him, oh, by the way, we're missing some emails. According to him.
That's right, but nobody that I know knew that was dealing with the Inspector General they were missing emails.
But we're investigating, but at that time it was investigating this whole thing which Ms. Lerner was a big part of.
Correct.
Okay. So again, I guess as I go back to my 15-year-old here, at a certain point in time, I have to just look at him and I have to say, Cameron, at a certain point in time, the load you're carrying in the bull in the back of the truck don't add up anymore. And nobody believes it. It's a bad position for you. I'd hate to be in your position. You've had an extended life of great service to this country. But what is really troubling, and for the people of the 9th District of Georgia, whether you figure probabilities or not, they have a pretty good meter. And the meter right now, both Democrats that I know and Republicans I know, has just gotten full. This story is just becoming more implausible as it goes. It crashes at a certain time. We can't find it at a certain time. No one was told about it at a certain time. I'm going to take you seriously that you really take responsibility for your job at the IRS. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you take responsibility for custodians of the records because you're the man at the top, as you have said before.
Correct.
Okay. Then, did you notify the archivist when you learned of the destruction of Ms. Lerner's emails earlier this year?
It was not a destruction of her emails.
Or loss of?
The loss of emails. I did not.
Okay, and that is supposed to be, because now let me ask you this. In Ms. Lerner's emails that you found out that we may not be able to obtain, you've talked about this before, some things are supposed to be kept, some things are not supposed to be kept. If you knew that there were some emails you might not could have found, there probably or possibly could have been emails in there that should have been kept under the Records Act, correct?
If there were emails to be kept under the Records Act, they would have been printed out. The responsibility is if you have an email that's a record, you print it out in hard copy. It's an archaic system, but that's the system.
But you can't say, especially if there was a possibility of something not right, you cannot sit here and say that Ms. Lerner would have kept or printed off emails she would not have wanted to be kept, correct? If you can, then there's a whole line of questioning the whole people are going to start coming back for.
No. My understanding is every employee is supposed to print records that are official records on hard copy and keep them. She had hard copy records. I don't know whether anything that was lost was an official record or not.
So it would be a matter of then just caution or prudent is that you should have probably told the archivist this.
No, I'm supposed to tell the archives as if there's been a destruction of records.
Well, a hard drive destroyed, would that not classify as destruction? Or are we back to parsing terms again?
No, this is her archives for record purposes are hard copies printed out of record
that you
email.
know of.
That's, I don't know what she knows. That's what she was supposed to do.
But again,
whether she did it or not, I don't know.
I'm trying to take it off of you. What you know of, but in a sense where you've lost it and it's since been destroyed, no way to go back and found the hard drive is destroyed, only what was printed was left. There's no way for you to tell if you should or should not have told the archivist, correct? So in prudence, you should have told the archivist. Would that not be true?
I could do that, yes.
Okay. Ms. Koskin, again, this is a long story. The people are just looking for the truth, and there are a lot of probably parents and non-parents and grandparents out there who trail the story this long together, and they just don't understand. They don't get it because they don't get the same. They can come to a story at the IRS, and the IRS would just basically say, we don't want the story. We don't care how much you broke. We don't care how much you couldn't afford to keep it. We just want the records that you're supposed to provide.
Right. And if
this is a sad trail down a wrong road. Ms. Koskin, your service has been good. Unfortunately, you're running into a dead end, and the American people are tired of it. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. We now go to the gentleman, Mr. Massey.
We've had him already.
You've already gone?
Yep.
Thank you. My order here.
It's an interesting conversation, but we're done.
Oh, you may stay again. You never know.
Right.
We now go to Mr. Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your patience. So let me follow up on Mr. Collins' line of questioning. Federal Records Act requires emails to be part of the record to be printed out. Is that correct?
Yeah. If the email is a record, it should be printed out in hard copy as the IRS policy.
So what is your definition of a record?
The record is, as the Act provides, any record of agency actions or policies. If you're just sending emails, conversing back and forth, those aren't records.
Conversing back and forth with regards to what? Because that's not what your manual says.
Pardon?
That's not what your manual says.
Manual says any record of agency actions, policies, or anything that would reveal important agency policies.
It says specifically, emails are records when they are created or received in the transaction of agency business.
That's correct. So if we're doing an exam or we're having a litigation, all of the information about that exam and that information is...
So what you're saying is that none of Lois Lerner's emails are part of agency business?
Lois Lerner printed hard copy emails which have been provided to you.
Hard copy of how many emails?
I have no idea.
Of all of them?
All of her emails were not official records.
And under what definition? Because I pulled the definition because, you know, really all I have to go by is the law.
Well,
and that's what you would have to go by, and I pulled the definition out of your policy book.
I would assure you I have not read very many Lois Lerner emails, but of the 67,000 you'll ultimately have, I will guarantee you a reasonable number of them are not going to be official records.
Under what definition?
Under the definition in that brochure.
Well, this definition says that they need to be machine-readable materials. That qualifies to almost every single email. Machine-readable is what this said.
That's in terms of that.
I'd like to ask that we put this in the record if we could.
Without objection, so ordered.
So if I'm following your manual and there has been no wrongdoing, I think is what your testimony says. There's been no wrongdoing. Isn't that what you said?
Yes, no wrongdoing in terms of the destruction, potential loss of these emails.
All right. So when someone did not notify the National Archives, was that wrongdoing? When you lost these, when you automatically said, golly, we can't find the emails, there might be just one email in there that's a record. Would that be a wrongdoing or breaking the law?
If we didn't advise the archivists that we lost a
well, you didn't. You didn't advise them because I have.
Because we did not have any evidence at this point whether they were official records or not. As stated by Mr. Collins, we could have called and said we've lost some emails and we don't know whether they're records or not. We thought we'd let you know, but we did not do that.
Okay. Can I submit for the record a letter from the National Archives expressing their concern over the fact that there may be official records that were not?
Without objection, so ordered.
So all of this and not following up is really according to the Democrats, really a money problem, and you've concurred with that. Is that what you would indicate?
We would be in much better shape if we had an electronic record system that was.
And the reason you don't is because of money.
I'm told that 2 years ago when they considered trying to do that they didn't have the funds to do it.
So can we tell the American taxpayers then that if they just don't have really the money to comply with IRS statutes, that that's okay, that it's okay to break the law as long as they don't have the money to comply?
I don't think we've established that the IRS broke the law.
Well, there is wrongdoing in terms of not keeping all the records according to the Federal Records Act. All of the records, would you agree some of the records are missing?
I have no idea whether official records are missing or not.
So you're here, your testimony today, let me make sure, your testimony today is that you do not know whether there are missing emails.
You asked about missing official records. I do know there are missing emails.
Would a normal person assume there may be one record in all of those emails that are missing?
We don't know how many are missing.
A reasonable person. No, you're an attorney. A reasonable person. Wouldn't a reasonable person think that in thousands of emails there would be one official record?
We don't know if thousands are missing or not. We are producing 24,000.
I didn't ask you that. I said a reasonable person. Wouldn't they agree? Are you a reasonable person?
Last time I checked.
Okay. Wouldn't you think that there might be one record in there? All right. Let me finish out because you say it's a money issue. Are you aware that $49 million were spent on conferences during the same time period? $49 million.
That was in
between 2010 and 2012. $49 million, according to the TIGTA report.
A substantial number of those are training conferences, bringing.
I didn't ask you. Were you aware that $49 million were? Yes or no?
I was not aware of the number.
Okay, $49 million. Some of that, $3,500 a night. We've already talked about a Star Trek video. Do you think you could have moved some of that $49 million to pay to make sure that the federal records were really preserved?
The gentleman's time has expired. You may answer.
I don't know the details of those events and what were training and what were wasted funds. It's all 3 and 4 years ago, long before I arrived.
That wasn't the gentleman's question. The gentleman's question was, do you think any of the, quote, money on those conferences, including the one for making Star Trek video, whether or not that could have been used properly for this purpose?
We needed 10 to 30 million. Whether there was 30 million or 10 million in that or not, I don't know. If there was money wasted, they certainly could have used it for this purpose. That's clear.
I thank the gentleman. We now go to the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Bentivolio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Nice to see you again, Commissioner. Before I forget, I have two questions or two lines of questioning. You said 4 to 5 people report to you regularly. Who are they? Can we have their names and titles?
Of the people who report to me, I actually have about 30 people who report to me regularly. There have been 4 or 5 who report to me in this area.
Okay. Can we have their names and titles?
I'll be happy to provide those.
Great, great. Do you believe there's a difference between objectivity and neutrality?
That's an interesting question. I suppose you could be objective. I don't know. I think both terms would imply that you're not involved personally in an issue. You're objective about it or you're neutral about it.
So there's synonyms.
I would think they could be viewed as synonyms, yes.
Okay. Well, objectivity is the ability to judge fairly despite bias, and neutrality is to have no stance regarding a particular issue. Do you think that employees at the IRS have any self-interest in who's elected as President of the United States?
I think as individuals, every American has an interest in who's elected President of the United States.
Would you say they're trying to be nonpartisan, IRS? Nonpartisan?
IRS is nonpartisan doesn't mean they can't have an interest in understanding the importance of the presidential election.
Okay, but they're not supposed to back one party or another, are they?
The Hatch Act does not prohibit IRS employees on their own time.
In their official duty.
Pardon?
In their official duty.
In their official duties, it's absolutely prohibited.
Okay. So my question is about self-interest. Do you believe that employees at the IRS can remain objective when analyzing the tax implications of groups and people that want them to lose their jobs?
Want them to lose their jobs. I think so. I think that they're professionals. They're dedicated to.
I have no doubt in their professionalism. I'm not asking you about that. I'm asking you about their neutrality and how it affects their objectivity. Do you believe that any person can sustain objectivity towards someone that they perceive as a threat to their livelihood?
I think they could be objective about it. I'm objective about continuing to hear. This is my 8th hearing, and I'm objective about it. I have good friends on all the committees, even though some of these hearings are a little more contentious than others. But I can be objective about it. It comes with the territory.
So what are they afraid of? I mean, they emails just provide all the information. It seems to me that if it was just, let's say somebody got carried away, you could have said, well, we apologize, we'll fix it, it'll never happen again. But the IRS isn't doing that, are they?
Thus far, since, as I recall, Commissioner Werfel and I have said if their people were unfairly selected, that was a mistake. I have apologized to anyone who was actually discriminated against, and I've said I am committed that that won't happen again.
But we're concerned about where it comes from, because it wouldn't be this big of an issue if there was really just some loose cannons in the outfit, so to speak. I mean, it seems to me that you could have said, they made a mistake, they shouldn't have done it, we've punished them, let's move on. But they didn't really do that.
The people involved in the chain of command in this issue are all gone.
I think there's, or retired?
They're no longer with the agency.
Right, except the ones in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Gentleman yield?
Yes. I yield to.
Will the gentleman yield?
To the gentleman.
He's already yielded to the gentleman from Ohio.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Koskinen, earlier you said that you did not tell Treasury, when you learned in April from who you can't remember, when you can't remember, but sometime in April, you said you did not communicate with the White House or with Treasury. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Here's a story from last week in Politico. It says, April of this year, this is from Neil Eggleston, White House counsel. April of this year, the Treasury's Office of General Counsel informed the White House counsel's office that it appeared Ms. Lerner's custodial email account had contained very few emails. So they were informed in April, the White House counsel, from the Treasury's chief counsel. So how did the Treasury's chief counsel find out?
I don't know.
No one. Did you tell people in the IRS, don't go tell anybody this stuff until we get all the information? Did you give that instruction to your folks?
No.
So someone at IRS told Treasury's chief counsel?
I assume that must be what happened. We meet with the Treasury regularly. I meet every 2 weeks.
Why didn't you tell them then?
Pardon?
Why didn't you tell them?
Because I am not reporting to the Treasury about this investigation. It's our responsibility, and we're taking.
And you don't know who told them.
Pardon?
You don't know who told them?
I have no idea who told them.
Did you tell someone else to go tell Treasury just so you wouldn't have to?
No.
You have no idea how the White House and how Treasury learned that this happened, that Lerner emails were lost in April, and we didn't know until June. You have no idea how that happened.
No, and so I've not had any discussion.
Well, we'd like to know who at IRS told the Treasury chief counsel, who then told the White House chief counsel, and they knew 2 months before we did. So we'd like to know who that person at the IRS is who informed them about something that important, and you didn't feel it was incumbent upon you to tell us. Can you find us that person?
I thought it was, I don't know who it is, but
we'll find out. You run the agency.
Fine. As I say,
why don't you send an email to all the employees in the IRS said, whoever told the White House counsel that we lost Lois Lerner emails, or at least there was the potential that we were going to lose them, I want to know who that person is so I can tell the chairman of this committee and we can question them. Can you do that for us?
Gentleman's time has expired. You may answer.
So you can question them. And what
of
were you?
Of course, we want to know why they told them. You didn't want to tell them.
I didn't want to. I told you we run the investigation. I have not talked to in the production of documents. I have not. Treasury doesn't tell me what to do. I don't tell Treasury what we're doing.
I'm not talking Treasury. I'm talking IRS. Someone from the IRS told Treasury. I want to know who that person is because it wasn't you.
Regular order, please. Regular order.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. You've gone over a minute.
State your point of order.
The point of order is the gentleman is over one.
State your point of order.
The point of order is the gentleman is over his time.
The real point of order is he won't answer the question.
The point of order, the chairman cut me off when.
I'm cutting you off again. We will maintain decorum. The parliamentarians will provide anyone with the proper way to state a point of order, which is, as Ms. Spear did, to cite within the rules a point of order as to whether rules are being properly adhered to. Congresswoman Spear did a very good job of citing a point of order, and I would ask all folks to please use the parliamentarians before they cite a point of order. We now go to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. DeSantis, for 5 minutes.
Commissioner, have you reviewed Dave Camp's letter from June 3rd, 2011 that he sent to the IRS?
I have not reviewed it. I only saw it this afternoon briefly.
Well, this is one of the, so he writes a letter, Lois Lerner's hard drive crashes 10 days later. You're supposedly now in charge of writing the IRS, and you haven't looked at that letter? You haven't reviewed that letter?
I scanned that letter. I'm not doing the investigation of what happened around.
Well, that letter requested that email records be preserved and turned over to the committee, the Ways and Means Committee. And according to your testimony, when her hard drive crashed, they never went to the backup servers to retrieve her emails, correct?
No, they never went to the backup tapes.
Exactly.
The backup server is very different. There is no backup server. There's a server that operates the emails.
Right, and then the tapes that they're stored on off-site, they never got the emails back. So even though the Congress requested it, the IRS didn't care. They just decided they're not going to go the extra mile to get those. Now, you testified last week in the Ways and Means Committee that you knew there was a problem February 2014 with Lois Lerner's emails, correct?
I was advised there was an issue.
Right. And in mid-March, the IRS, according to your testimony, review team learned additional facts about her mysterious computer crash, correct?
That's correct.
And then you testified in this committee at the end of March. And you promised this committee, they played the montage, Gowdy, Chaffetz, Jordan, Issa, everyone, get us Lois Lerner's emails, get us Lois Lerner's emails. You said, yes, we'll do it. You never mentioned, you never disclosed that there were real problems about whether you were in fact going to be able to turn over those emails, correct?
At that time, I did not know they were real problems.
Well, here's what you wrote. Here's what you told Dave Camp. You said in February, this is page 6 of your testimony last week. In February, what we knew was there was a problem because we were looking at it from the standpoint of what time frame was in which her emails appeared. And it appeared that there were not enough emails in that time frame. So in mid-February, you had reason to believe that you were short of emails in that critical time frame. Per your testimony last week, correct?
When I say we, the review team did that, I knew simply that there was a problem in the way the emails were spread throughout the time frame. I did not know the details of it.
Your testimony said we, meaning the IRS. So I guess now you're saying that you did not know that you were somehow, even though the commissioner, you're not in the loop. Now here's the issue.
Good.
Jason Chaffetz was going back and forth with you at the March hearing, and you basically told him, we will get Lerner's emails. They are stored in servers, is what you said. Now, my question for you is, why say that if you knew, one, there were a problem with Lerner's emails, and two, you knew that the backup tapes were only saved for 6 months? Why tell Chaffetz that you were going to be able to retrieve it when you had reason to believe that that may not be the case?
Because at that time, we had pulled all of the emails out of her hard drives and others and had put them into a server system known as Clearwell, was my understanding, which is the way we search them. They have to be searched. It's a pool. You have to then pull out. It's got
No, I understand that. But again, your testimony, there was reason in mid-February that there were not enough emails. So whatever pool you had, then the time period in question with the computer crash, you testified that there was a possibility that this was coming up short. So the question is you made a choice as you testified not to disclose this fact to Congress. Now, you've been asked, when did you know for sure there were emails missing? You said April. When in April? You said April. You wouldn't get any more definitive from that. And then you said you were advised not to disclose it. Who advised you not to disclose it?
I did not say I was advised not to disclose it.
And why didn't you disclose it?
Because my sense was what we needed to do was find out the facts and the details, and when we found those, we would give you all of the information. My experience, as I explained to Congressman Camp, is last Monday we did provide information that we had just learned that day, our staff did, that we had custodians who had had hard drive crashes,
but you've
and
acknowledged,
immediately thereafter, people leaped to conclusions in the public with press releases, which 3 days later turned out to be wrong. So my point
I think that you have a duty of candor to Congress and the American people, and you certainly had some reason to believe that there were going to be issues with producing her emails in your March testimony, because you've admitted it with Ways and Means that there were issues. Now, maybe you weren't kept up, or maybe you weren't following closely enough. I don't know, but I think this is very important because the average taxpayer looks at this And if they're ever in a situation where they can't produce documents, they are presumed guilty, period, end of story. It's not even a question. And yet the IRS is in a situation where they can say, well, we had a computer crash. The probability of that is very small, as Mr. Massey indicated. Just so happened to happen 10 days after Dave Camp asked for information. And so I don't think that the American people are satisfied with this. And with all due respect, I don't think your testimony is going to be satisfactory to those who have real concerns about whether we're going to get to the bottom of what happened with the IRS. And I yield back.
Can I make just one point?
It is the practice of the committee to always let a witness answer a question if there's a question pending. The gentleman may answer.
I appreciate it. This is just a statement I want the public to be confident about, and that is, when we're dealing with taxpayers and if they can't produce a record, we are open to their producing other evidence that would be consistent with that. So if somebody said, we've lost some emails, but I've reconstructed 24,000 of them, we would take that into consideration. And in fact, there's a legal precedent that says if your actions and the evidence generally produces support for what you say happened, even if you don't have the documents, that's acceptable. So the idea that if you've lost a document, it means you've lost the case with the IRS, that's incorrect. We actually will work with taxpayers trying to make sure that if they've got supporting information of any kind, our notices out to corporations say, here's what we'd like in documents, but if you haven't got them all, if you've got something close to that, you can give us other information, we'll take that. So I just want the record to be clear.
Well, we'd be happy to accept whatever alternatives you can produce to show what Lerner did.
The gentleman's time has expired. Commissioner, the good news is there aren't as many members left for the second round. So this should be fairly brief.
I liked it in the old days where you only had one round.
How old is that?
Well, it must be very old.
Well, we'll try to be fairly short. Mr. Cummings.
Commissioner, let me say this. I really thank you. I thank you from the depths of my heart for taking on this task. I cannot begin to tell you how pained I feel listening to all of this. You know, when you've got a person who has given what you've given and have been brought into difficult circumstances, and I don't know how old you are, but, you know, at my age, I begin to think about my own mortality and think about my reputation. First of all, I want to thank you for being who you are. I want to thank you for giving a damn and caring about our country. Some of the statements that have been made here today make it look like, you know, you're just coming up here trying to fool people, when under Republican and Democratic administrations, you have been highly regarded. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We're better than that. We are a better country than that. And we are a better committee than that. You know, when I reviewed the IRS employees' interviews, you know what they said? It was very interesting. They said something similar to what you said. They said they were constantly asked about their party affiliation and that kind of thing. Some were Republicans, some were Democrats. One even described himself as a very conservative Republican. But you know what they said? They said they left their party hats at the door. You know why? Because they wanted to make sure when they went in there and did their job that they did it in a way that was fair to all Americans. And so, yeah, there are issues, but I don't, you know, sometimes I sit here and I listen to all of this, and somebody asked me about this committee the other day. And they said that if you were to leave the committee today, what would you most regret? I said, I would mourn for what could have been. I would mourn for what could have been. We are a committee of oversight and government reform. And I'm glad that the IRS took the 9 recommendations of the IG, who, by the way, was appointed by a Republican. The same IG said no White House involvement. But we just pushed the facts over there. Said, let's get to, let's see what, oh, he's coming up here. Let's see what we can do to him. But you know what? After the hearing is over, I care about your reputation. I care about what people think of you. And I really mean that. And I don't want a moment to go by without you knowing that I appreciate you coming into this institution, giving it the best you got, and then having to come in here and go through this hell. And that's not to say everything was done perfectly. I don't think anybody up here is perfect. All of us have had problems. As I say to my constituents, all of us are the walking wounded. And if we aren't the walking wounded, we just keep on living. And so again, I want to thank you very much. And by the way, if there was any kind of inappropriate criteria, I've said it before. I have a problem with that with regard to conservatives. I also have a problem with regard to progressives and anybody else. And I'm sure I speak for all our members when I say I really do thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Ohio is next in seniority.
I thank the chairman. Look, I agree with the ranking member. We're all imperfect. We all are in need of God's grace, and we do appreciate the public servants who work hard every day on behalf of the American people. But I will tell you something. I also care about the thousands of people who were denied their First Amendment rights when this targeting scheme took place. I care about people like Catherine Engelbrecht, who was visited 6 times by the FBI after she applied for tax-exempt status, who after she applied had her personal and business finances audited by the IRS for the previous 2 years, who got visited by ATF, OSHA. I care about those people too, and that's why we're so concerned about getting to the truth. And so I just have one question. I'll be quick. Mr. Costin, you've testified several times here tonight, answered many questions, where we talked about you knew there were problems in February, you knew there were more problems in mid-March, you came in front of this committee in late March, you didn't disclose to us, but then someone, and the reason you said you didn't disclose to us was because this was so important, so critical, that you get all the information, get all the facts, get all the information, and then give it to us, correct? You wanted to get the full story before you went public with any of this, correct?
Right, and I would remind you, when I testified here in March, I had no idea whether there was a serious problem or not. I just knew there was an issue.
You knew there was an issue, you knew there was problems. Based on your testimony, you knew that there had been a crash of her computer. I mean, that's in your testimony. But your testimony is you wanted to get all the facts before you went public, right?
Correct. Yes.
You thought that was important?
Yes.
Get all the information.
Yes.
And yet, one of your employees told the Treasury and the White House in early April, and you didn't, whoa. So all I'm asking is, if it was so important, so critical to get the full picture before this information got out, why didn't you tell all the people who work in your agency, we're not going to say anything, we're not going to communicate about this until we get the full picture? Why didn't you give that instruction to all? If it's so critical that you can't share with Congress, you waited 2 months after you knew in April that they'd lost emails. If it's that important, then why didn't you tell your employees, don't talk about this, don't tell the White House counsel, don't tell the Treasury counsel? Why didn't you give that instruction?
Because I didn't think that if somebody actually told anyone, I didn't tell them, they shouldn't tell this committee. I was not telling people what not to do. I set forward a program in which I said we need to find all of the facts, we need to pull it all together, and we will make a public disclosure of it, which we did.
But that's not what happened, Mr. Koskinen. The Chief Counsel of Treasury knew about it and talked to the Chief Counsel at the White House in April. right after you found out about it. That's what we're concerned about. All I'm saying is if it's so important, I think a proactive leader, a good manager would say, hey, let's get to the truth first. Let's get all this. Let's not communicate this. Let's tell everyone at the same time. Let's tell Congress the same. If it's okay to tell the White House, why isn't it okay to tell the People's House?
Because the White House is not going to do what the Ways and Means Committee did with the piece of information we gave them piecemeal. That is, they're not going to make a big issue about it until all the facts are out.
Maybe it's because the White House is the same party, right? Maybe could that have anything to do with it, Mr. Koskinen?
I have no idea, but I would stress again in your earlier
you may not have any idea, but the facts are the facts.
The facts are the
Treasury
facts.
knew, White House knew in April. We didn't know till late June.
No one in the IRS talked to the White House.
Whoa. Then how'd they find out?
Pardon?
How'd they find out?
I'm told by the people who have read the White House letter, the White House found out from Treasury. Nobody from the IRS talked to the White House.
Someone from the IRS talked to Treasury then.
That's what I understand.
Well, and as I've said before, we'd like to know who that person is.
Fine.
I hope you'll find out. Can you make a commitment to this committee tonight that you're going to go find out who that individual was, who those individuals were, who talked to the Treasury Chief Counsel, who then talked to the White House 2 months before the People's House got that same information? Can you make that commitment?
I'll do my best.
Well, let's hope it's better now. I yield back.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'd be happy to yield.
And I appreciate you trying to find out. It would save us a lot of trouble of going through all the people to find out. But you just said something that I wanted to make sure I understood. You said, and I'm paraphrasing, maybe the White House wouldn't release it the way Ways and Means released a document. Is that right?
Yes. In other words, my experience has been in this issue that any information that comes out piecemeal immediately gets an overreaction to it.
Well, your overreaction is your statement. I guess the question I have is, hasn't the White House selectively leaked documents in the past?
I have no idea. I'm not involved in any of those issues.
You've probably read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or the Washington Post. Isn't it true the White House does put out piecemeal documents that favor them when they get them and hold back ones when they don't?
I'm not familiar with what the White House activities are.
I guess I'll wait for my own time, but I must admit I'm a little insulted to hear that the White House is trustworthy and Congress isn't, in your opinion. The gentleman from Nevada, Mr. Horsford, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's kind of interesting how positions change over time because looking back on some of the record, it appears that when the Bush White House lost millions of emails related to the leak of covert CIA agent Valerie Plame's identity and the U.S. Attorney firings, this same committee held a hearing in 2008. At that hearing, Chairman Issa said this, and I quote, "I think it is fair that we recognize that software moves on and that archiving in the digital age is not as easy as it might seem to the public." At the same hearing, Chairman Issa discussed how Congress needs to provide more funding to help agencies improve their archiving technology. He said this, and I quote, "The House of Representatives needs to begin making sure you are funded, and that is part of what we do in Oversight. Fund it to deal with ever-evolving technologies where archiving isn't just putting them away, it is being able to retrieve it." Now, it appears that Chairman Issa's perspective has changed. With respect to the loss of Ms. Lerner's emails, he believes the loss of her emails is evidence of, quote, "nefarious conduct." Chairman Issa has repeatedly stated this assertion, but yet said something completely different in a previous hearing. Commissioner, as far as you can tell, the only difference between the statements Chairman Issa made in 2008 and the statements he made now is that there was a Republican administration then and that there is a Democratic administration now. The fact is that the IRS and many other federal agencies have struggled to improve their electronic record retention for years. GAO, the National Archivist, and others have been reporting on these problems repeatedly. So I have main question that I'd like to ask, Commissioner, and that's what can you do to explain to this committee the steps that are being taken to restore the public's trust in the IRS and the function that it provides to the American people in this regard to the data and the protection of that data?
We are reviewing all of our activities. I've asked for this some time ago to see if at a minimum we couldn't create an electronics record system that would be more searchable. We have spent, as everybody now knows, close to between $18 and $20 million trying to produce documents as quickly as we can and emails as quickly as we can because of the archaic system that requires us to go to 90,000 individual hard drives, or in this case 83 custodian individual hard drives. We're going to continue to do that. The archivist last year made a recommendation that as a way to begin to do this, we take the top 35. It's called a capstone proposal. I'm sure he'll testify tomorrow about it. That is a start, recognizing the costs, that we develop systems with the top 35 people in the agency where their records are automatically, electronically put into a record system as the first step. And we're going to take a look at that, which would obviously be less expensive than trying to archive the entire agency's records. But I do think it's important for us to preserve official records. It's important for history. It's important for people to understand the basis on which we make decisions, and we're going to continue to do that. We are constrained. The issues are how we spend our money. It's an important issue as to how we do it, but it is in a situation where we have substantially fewer funds than we had 4 years ago, 10,000 fewer employees, and substantially increased responsibilities. But it is an important issue for us to consider, and we're going to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And again, I want to commend you. I say often on this committee, we are the Oversight Committee, but we're also the Government Reform Committee. And I would like to hear your recommendations as we move forward on how we put those recommendations in place and what this committee can do to support you in those endeavors. It's one thing to have as many hearings as we've had without any substantiated evidence to suggest continuing, but to not have one hearing on how we can implement any of the recommendations to improve the system, I think is a flaw in the way this committee is managed. And, Mr. Chairman, I know my time is up, but under Rule 9, Sub A, I think that the Chairman needs to ensure that there is equal time given to each side and that members should not have their mics cut off and then members in the majority allowed to speak well over their permitted time.
We now go to Mr. Massey for 5 minutes or such time, less that he may consume.
Thank you. We could
That's right. He's not required to use the full 5 minutes, right?
And I'll
it is not required, but seldom yielded back.
It really depends on the answer. I'm going to try and be short, and I really appreciate your patience and your stamina here tonight, so I'll be short with this question. On June 3rd, 2011, Ways and Means Chairman Dave Camp sent the IRS a letter demanding to explain the allegations of targeting Tea Party and other conservative groups. He also requested that emails be provided or preserved. Within 10 days, Lois Lerner's hard drive crashed. Now, we know her hard drive crashed because we know this for sure because there was a ticket filed with the IT department, is that correct, for a repair?
That's correct.
Could you provide us with all of the tickets filed in the month of June 2011 at the IRS for failed hard drives?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes.
I thank the gentleman. We are nearing the end, but I'll need a few more minutes, so I want to be brief, but I want to be thorough. Ms. Lerner, you didn't know. You say you never met her. My understanding is from the reports that the hard drive that failed was on her laptop. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar. I know Nicole Flax's travel computer is where the hard drive failed, not her office computer.
Right. Well,
I'm assuming, in light of where the archives went, that it was her office computer where the hard drive failed.
So I just want to understand from a procedural standpoint, employees of the IRS download emails, which may include 6103 information, to their laptops and leave the building with them. Is that correct?
That's right. A number of employees, their office computer is, in fact, a laptop.
And as a result, when they leave the office, they take with them emails that may include 6103 information.
That's possible, yes.
To your knowledge, are laptops in the IRS universally limited so they may not employ USB drives?
They are now. There was, as I understand, a situation some years ago in which they were, well, I guess what I should say is years ago, USB drives, thumb drives were usable that were not encrypted. And there was an issue that came to my attention 3 or 4 months ago where fortunately no information was misused by the public. Since that time, which is several years ago, all thumb drives are encrypted so that if the thumb drive is lost, nobody can access the data.
I appreciate that. Congress has implemented a similar thing, but we also can go by, at best, by normal thumb drives. So if Lois Lerner's laptop was in fact, or any of these other people's laptops or office computers, in fact had the USB on, any of them that downloaded information, including 6103 information, to their local drives could have in fact moved them to USB-based external drives or to thumb drives of their own purchase. Is that correct?
That sounds right. I don't know what the equipment looked like 3 years ago, but I would assume that that sounds right.
So for the American people, it is very possible and in fact probable that every day individuals leave the IRS with personally identifiable information covered under 6103 on their hard drives inside laptops that they take home on trips to conferences and the like.
I think that's correct, to the extent of my knowledge. I may be corrected when I get back, but that sounds correct.
So that means that, in fact, Lois Lerner, an attorney, may have made a copy of information on her hard drive that died, and she could have it on a USB product, or any kind of product, but normally a USB-based thumb drive or external hard drive. To your knowledge, you have no reason to know that she couldn't have done that.
That's correct.
So, in fact, Lois Lerner may have made copies of this before the failure of her computer. To your knowledge, when the Department of Justice questioned Lois Lerner, was she asked any of those questions?
I have no idea.
To your knowledge, did she have a USB or any other product that could have taken copies off of her computer?
I have no knowledge that she did.
To your knowledge, did she also have a laptop or dual-purpose computer that she took home with her or left the building with?
I don't know.
Okay. I would now ask unanimous or let me rephrase that. Let me just do one more. You have 90,000 computers that basically use their local hard drives to store information, emails, instead of on the server, because after so many days it disappears off of, after half a year, they disappears off the server. Is that right?
No. The server will keep your emails until you get to 6,000, and then you'll get a notice saying you have to either archive them or delete them. The backup tapes that preserve information for 6 months are separate. The server, you may have emails on your server for 5 years if you
don't hit that number.
If you don't hit the 6,000.
Okay. Obviously, Lois Lerner with tens of thousands did. I now would recognize myself for my own time. Continuing on, I spent a lot of time in the electronics industry, and so I have a bit of a passion for this. Are you aware that if you back up your systems every 6 months, that the cost that we would be looking at for what it would have cost to have backed them up essentially once a month would be cost of the tape drive, that in fact those tapes or cartridges that would be retained? And my understanding pretty obviously is that wouldn't be $10 million, would it be?
No, I don't think so.
So with your limited budget, if instead of throwing away or recycling after 6 months the cartridges and simply reusing them because you're only using them for disaster recovery, if you bought 12 sets of cartridges so that every month you made a backup, and then in fact use the incremental backup systems that exist, you could have backed up your systems and retained them for 7 years for a fraction of $10 million, couldn't you?
That's great, but you would simply have a capacity to, as a disaster recovery system, that process is not a searchable email system.
I appreciate your telling me that, because I served on this committee in this room, in that position, when Henry Waxman, because the Bush White House, in conversion from Lotus Notes to Windows Exchange Server or Microsoft Exchange Server, failed to have good backups, and they used their image backups at a cost of a great deal of money to restore countless emails so that the Presidential Records Act, the Federal Records Act would be fully maintained. Do you have any recollection of those hearings or that activity?
I do not.
To this committee, it's pretty famous. Mr. Waxman did not care that it cost an estimated $24 million to recover every single one of those emails. This committee aggressively said they had to do it, and they did image restorations. Had you done image backups and retained them prior to your arrival, but had the IRS done it, it would have cost probably tens of thousands of dollars to maintain 6 or 7 years' worth of those, and we wouldn't be having the same discussion today, would we?
No, it would have cost a lot of money, as you know, to then get emails off of those recovery tapes. But that's right. If we had them, we could then spend the millions of dollars it would take to pull it off the disaster recovery tapes. But that's not what the disaster recovery tapes are meant to do.
What's interesting is the images or disaster recovery tapes. The reason it cost so much with the White House is they wanted every email retained or recovered. We only wanted Lois Lerner's. I'd like to enter in the record now a document given to us by the National Archives, and I'll show it because it's a little hard to see, but there we go.
A little hard to read from here.
Well, I'll read you just a piece of it. Andrew Jackson of the State of Tennessee, the first day of December, 1799, is still burned, and he's complaining through Congress. This is essentially a congressional record where he petitions the United States Congress in 1803 to recover, and he started in 1801 with an affidavit, for his loss of revenues paid in 1799 because his stills burned after they collected the revenue in advance for his hundreds of gallons of liquor. I only put that in the record for one reason. The National Archives, and the archivist will be with us tomorrow, maintains an amazing amount of documents and recovers documents. Now, Andy Jackson, General Jackson, wanting his money back on his still may not be anything other than humorous this late at night, but it's part of the wealth of information the American people have access to just across the street. Your agency came here and said on a $1.8 billion budget, you did this tonight, that in fact you needed more money if you were going to maintain records. I would certainly hope that when you go back and you scrub that $10 million in order to do X and more to do Y, that you go back and you really ask within the best practices whether or not to meet, for your CIO, to meet the requirement of the National Archives having access to the kind of information, the wealth of information they need. Working with the National Archives, you can do it and do it for a reasonable price. Mr. Horsford was correct. I have been a big believer that, in fact, maintaining for the American people the transparency, not just of what Mr. Cummings and I are doing here tonight, but for the next generation, the generation beyond, as much information as we possibly can is an obligation. Earlier, Mr. Deschales, I may be cynically, maybe just doing the arithmetic, looked at that sort of nickel a page to print out and stick in a file drawer and later turn over to the National Archives paper. I strongly suggest that this committee and you for your agency, this committee for all of government, really take a look at how much less expensive it is to maintain it digitally, to deliver it digitally so that it can be machine searchable for the next generation and, in fact, be of a benefit to all of us. Lastly, I'm going to guess that on the $111 per employee's computer, because that's what $10 million is, you could easily have covered that expense, that $10 million expense, by simply downgrading those local drives, because, in fact, there's very little reason for them to have large local drives. Lastly, and I'm going to close with this, and this is really not as much questions. You're familiar with the interrogatories we sent, some 50 questions?
On Saturday afternoon, yes.
Yes, 48 hours before the hearing. You're aware that, for the most part, there was no response other than a short oral briefing this afternoon in which presentations were made that were not part of the interrogatories in some cases.
A little hard to get everybody together on a Sunday, even though it is counted as the 48 hours.
No, I understand.
We got your email, your request at about 4:30 Saturday afternoon.
No, I understand that. But there was 8 hours of work day today. The questions we have, for the most part, are the questions that you should have already asked. They should have been answerable immediately. There will be some additional questions that I will send in interrogatories to you. They will ask you to please see if you can figure out whether it was the 1st of April that you learned about the real loss of documents 7 days after you testified, or 30 days after, to narrow down the April, and to narrow down who told you about it. There obviously is the question of how the White House came to know. Well, Congress was never informed about these losses of documents until your 7-page letter. So for that purpose, we will now recess. If I'm able to get the interrogatories and the follow-up calls done in a timely fashion, I will be pleased to adjourn this. But for now, we are recessing subject to recall. We stand in recess.